What's going on, everyone?
How are we? How are we? Welcome back, Casey. Good to be back. Took the week off last week for Thanksgiving, but good to be back here with you.
Yeah, we're excited about the football over the weekend, but I wanted to ask, of course, you already kind of brought it up a little bit, your holiday weekend. You actually spent the holidays with Nick Saban coaching up that game plan. That final score there at the end was all you, right? That was all your play design, right?
If that's the story we're going to rock with, I certainly won't push back. But yeah, Casey, I was here all week practicing for the Iron Bowl. Was lucky enough to get down there to Auburn and see one of the greatest games that I've ever seen in person. I mean, what a finale! And then this Saturday, last promised game of the year for my Crimson Tide, take on Trace Fowler's Bulldogs in Atlanta. So that should be a fun one for all of us, I'm sure.
Now, we had this debate before we get deep into the show. We had this debate whether or not the kickoff return for a touchdown that Auburn had, I don't know if that was against Alabama or not. If that was more ludicrous than the 30-40 yard touchdown pass that just happened over the weekend. What are your thoughts? I mean, I'm assuming that you're going to say the kickoff, or not the kickoff, but the field goal return for a touchdown. Is that more crazy
The
than?
kick six is absurd. I mean, just to be able to return a field goal, 102 yards, 103 yards for a touchdown when they put a second on after time had expired. I don't think we're going to see anything quite like the kick six ever again in college football. But yeah, on the 10-year anniversary, Alabama got their own, and that was certainly a miracle. And it was pretty amazing. There's only been one fourth down conversion in the history of college football longer than that 31-yard conversion Alabama had to win the game. So pretty cool, and definitely cool to see in person.
Yeah, I would have loved to have watched that live. That would have been a great game to watch live. But it was a good weekend for football. Lots of great football that we watched over the weekend. Let's jump right into Week 12's rundown, breakdown of what happened over this great holiday weekend of football. But we're gonna start. We're gonna start with Aaron Rodgers, activated off of the IR, has the 21-day practice window starting right now. Right. I just can't believe he did this after the Jets are 4-7. Like what is he thinking?
Yeah, seeing this today was definitely a surprise to me as well. I know we had our rundown all planned out, and then as soon as he opened his practice window, Rodgers went straight to the top. This is definitely the story that I think everyone is most interested in the NFL right now. And this doesn't necessarily mean he's coming back to play. This just means they have 3 weeks to decide. So I think he's going to run around and try to throw the ball at practice. You saw him today. There were a bunch of clips hopping on one leg, running in circles. I think he's wanting to show off a little bit on that first day back on the field. But I really don't expect Aaron Rodgers to come back and play this year. The O-line that got him hurt in week one, the O-line that you were concerned about all summer long, has only gotten worse as the years went on. And I think it'd be absolutely terrible for Aaron Rodgers to get behind them on who knows how healthy of an Achilles. I mean, this is completely unprecedented. He tore it 79 days ago. So it's just absolutely unbelievable that he's even practicing, much less considering coming into the game. But if the Jets lose one more game, they're probably out of the playoffs. If they lose two more, they're definitely done. So if he's not back in a week or two, then I think he's definitely shut down for sure.
Elliot and I guess Reed as well, we were all doing box lunch earlier today. For those of you that are subscribed to that, our memberships, we talked about Aaron Rodgers coming back and what that would potentially look like. And the schedule just isn't very favorable for the Jets. I just don't think it's going to work out. They got to still play Miami. They got to play the Texans. Two really tough teams to play before they even think about getting Rodgers back. And then, if you got to win out, basically, you got to win out in the AFC. So that'd be really tough. Don't think that's going to end up happening, but I'm curious to see if you'll. He said he wasn't going to step on the field unless they had a chance. So maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. We'll see.
Just the fact that we're having the conversation 2 months, 2.5 months after the injury is just absolutely insane that we've gotten this far. So kudos to Rodgers for getting this far in the recovery anyway.
Right, of course. Thanksgiving, we had 2 blowouts and 1 upset. What was your favorite game from the Thanksgiving slate?
My favorite game was the Dallas Commanders game because I had the Dallas Commanders game to be the highest scoring game of the day, and it was. So that saved basically my entire Thanksgiving slate. But that Packers Lions game, I know we talked about it, obviously not on the show yet last week, but going into Thanksgiving, and we thought the Lions were going to take care of business, but that just wasn't the case. Packers went out and got the job done. That game was very interesting. Jordan Love looks like the real deal at quarterback again, much like he did to start the year. But yeah, you have to think that Packers team might be making a push in the NFC North. Standings are a little closer than you think off first glance. It's getting a little tight over there in the NFC.
Yes, I know that my boss would love for that to be the case, and he's actually said he's had a little hope. He was down bad. He's got a little hope though that his Packers can maybe sneak into that wild card spot. I think the NFC North race is pretty much out of contention for the Packers, but hey, maybe they can find some more wins here coming up. And we'll talk about them here very shortly. My favorite game was also the Dallas game, by the way. I just love when the NFL has players that break records or like something that's unprecedented that we hadn't seen before. And 5 touchdown returns, 7 interceptions on the season for Deron Bland. I don't know how you don't consider him as your top pick right now at this point for Defensive Player of the Year, statistically alone.
It's unbelievable. 5 pick sixes is obviously a number that we've never seen before in the history of the NFL. But I think this comes back to a lot of the conversations we had when Trayvon Diggs had his incredible interception season just a couple of years back. When you have to look at more than just the picks, Deron Bland doing such a great job getting points for his team, getting possessions back for his offense, but he's also allowing a lot of yards. And that's a give and take that you have to have with a corner that's going to make a lot of interceptions. It reminds me of a guy much like Marcus Peters early in his career. He allowed a lot of yards, but he always got the ball in crucial situations. So you left him out there and you were fine with it. And Deron Bland's a very similar player to that. I think he's been great. You see him creeping up the board for Defensive Player of the Year odds. And if he can continue this streak, then absolutely nobody's going to stop him. But I think it's a little early to be talking Defensive Player of the Year for Deron Bland.
Yeah, and moving on from the Thanksgiving slate, you wanted to talk about the AFC South a little bit, and the future is bright for them. I think you look at the Jags, which we know about Trevor Lawrence. They're 8-3. That team is built really solid. I called them the mini Bengals. Maybe they end up being more than that, specifically because how the Bengals are right now. But you look at Houston with CJ Stroud. We talked about him being in MVP conversations. He's still putting up those numbers. Barely missed out on tying the game against the Jags. That was a great game to watch. If those of you that actually did watch that game and not the Steelers Bengals. Colts. I mean, we haven't seen what Anthony Richardson will look like moving forward, but the weeks that he was here, he looked really good. Colts I think they're on the uptrend too. I mean, they're still in this fight. They're in this wild card race. They're 6-5. I like the AFC South a lot.
It's great. I can't think of another division in the NFL off the top of my head with that great quarterback play across the board. And you didn't even mention the Titans with Will Levis, who knows what he's going to be as his career continues to unfold, but he's certainly shown flashes of being a very exciting quarterback. We know what Mike Vrabel can do with just parts on that team, getting them to be competitive. So definitely expect the Titans to be in the mix, not necessarily this year, but down the line as we continue in the AFC South for sure. I think this is a division that we're going to just see beat each other up for the next many, many years. It's not going to be a division producing one seeds. It's going to be a division producing 10-7 champions because Trevor Lawrence is going to win his, CJ Stroud's going to win his, and Anthony Richardson's going to win some of his own, and the Titans are certainly pesky. So I think this is going to be a really, really fun division to watch over the next decade as a lot of these young players' careers continue to unfold.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Another very young team, Atlanta. They are in the driver's seat. They're back on top in the NFC South. Not much to gain from losing that number one spot. They're 5-6, and they lead their division. So that means they have the fourth seed in the NFC playoff race. That's just crazy. That I mean, we're even talking about them at this point. The NFC South has just been a joke for a couple years now, and Falcons being at 5-6, I'm not surprised that that's where they're at. I'm just surprised that they're number one in the NFC South, and they just keep beating their own teams in their division. Like they beat the Saints once, they beat the Bucks once, they beat the Panthers once. So they keep this up. I mean, they have a real shot of winning their division, and with a quarterback like Desmond Ridder, it's just really shocking.
Just the fact that one of these teams is going to presumably get to host the Cowboys in the playoffs, the Cowboys being somewhere around a 12-5, maybe even 13-4 team, and they're going to get to go to the 9-8, 8-9 Falcons for the first round of the playoff. Just a hilarious system we have in the NFL. Obviously, division winners need to go, but I think at some point we need to start thinking about looking at how we're hosting these playoff games. I mean, the regular season has to matter for everybody. I get that winning your division has to matter, but there's no reason any of these NFC South teams should get to host a playoff game. And like we talked about with the AFC South future being so bright, it might be the exact opposite in the NFC South. I mean, Desmond Ridder, I know Casey has a little bit of faith, but Desmond Ridder and Arthur Smith's certainly on the hot seat. New Orleans with Dennis Allen and Derek Carr, that's a hot mess. Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles is going to be out of there soon. Baker Mayfield's on a rental deal. And then we all know about the dumpster fire in Carolina, 1-10, doesn't even have their first round pick this year. But they're still mathematically alive to host a playoff game this year. And that just comes back to how just atrocious this NFC South is. And it doesn't look like it's going to get better very soon unless one of these guys hit the jackpot on a quarterback.
Right. And it's funny to me that Atlanta, I feel like out of all the teams, I do truly think that Atlanta is the closest team to being a complete roster, being a quarterback away from all the other teams in the NFC South. But they're all right there in that mediocrity. We'll see what happens at the end of this year. I don't expect Atlanta to be there, but at the same time, I don't expect any of those teams to be there. So we'll see. We'll see. The Eagles, they just keep winning. The other bird in the NFC South, or the NFC. And, they just keep winning close games. They look good. As of late, they've looked good. Scoring a lot of points. They're just a really weird best team in the NFL this year, is how I would describe it. They're one of those teams that, out of all the teams in like the last 20 years that have gone 10-1, I think there's a stat that says that the point differential, like they have one of the closest or like the most even keeled point differentials in all those 20 teams that have ended up being like the top of the league at this point in the season. So it just goes to show you that the league it's really, really balanced this year, and all things considered. Eagles being the top team this year doesn't feel like it. It certainly doesn't look like that because of the stats, but they are. They are the top team. They're 10-1 and lead the NFL right now.
Yeah, at some point, winning is winning, and I love to nitpick the Philadelphia Eagles as much as anyone else, but they're 2 games above everyone else in the entire NFL at this point, sitting at 10-1, and you just have to give credit where it's due. They're beating good teams, they're winning close games, and they're just getting the job done. They seem to escape every single week, but they never seem to lose faith. You never see Jalen Hurts, losing his mind on the sideline, other than one blowout from A.J. Brown early in the season. They seem to really have great chemistry on both sides of the ball. Jalen Hurts does certainly still look injured. His knee is not completely right. He's not running on his own. Basically, all designed runs, nothing, off of the pass, and he's sliding and avoiding all contact, which you certainly like to do. But that's not the Jalen Hurts that we fell in love with last year as an MVP candidate. He is the MVP favorite right now, but certainly not impressive at the current pace. If Jalen Hurts wins MVP, he would be one of the least impressive MVPs in the history of the NFL. So I think that goes back to what Casey said. No one's really separating themselves, even though the Eagles are 10-1 and 2 games ahead of the rest of the league. Individuals as well. It doesn't seem like anyone is really separating themselves from the pack. It seems like a very even NFL this year, and that just comes back to the best team being the Eagles.
Yeah. One thing that I know we didn't write it down here, but I'll get your thoughts maybe later. Um, you look at the way the NFL has started to shift away from being super pass happy. The teams that are the best in the league, all of them can run the ball. And yeah, some of them can also throw, but you look at like the Lions, you look at the 49ers, the Eagles, you look at the Ravens, all these teams all have very great run games and really good defense. And I think that we're getting to that old age, or that defenses are catching up, one or the other, and that teams are starting to have to be more balanced and or be able to run the ball because defenses are just catching up to teams that like to pass all the time. And that's also another reason why I think the league is the way it is right now. Just a observation that I had. Maybe if you have any thoughts on that. If not, we could.
That's certainly a great point that you made. And just like you said, those top teams not only can run the ball, but they invest in running the ball. The Eagles just traded for DeAndre Swift. The Ravens, you know how much they put into their backfield. Obviously, a lot of those running backs are hurt at this point in the season, but they are committed to running the football. The Chiefs drafting Isaiah Pacheco, obviously getting lucky with a 7th-round pick, but he's been incredibly productive for them in the backfield. The Niners trading basically a 1st-round pick equivalent for Christian McCaffrey. The Lions signing David Montgomery and drafting Jahmyr Gibbs in the 1st round. The teams at the top of the league are not ignoring the run game. They're just getting creative with it. None of these guys are getting 20 carries between the tackles. That is not how running the football in the NFL works anymore. It's outside pitches. It's even short screen pass plays. That's what the Bengals love to do, to try to incorporate that as their run game. But it can't be the only thing you have to offer. The way that these guys have multiple backs that can do different things, and they pepper the power game in with the quick pass game, that's what makes offense work. This isn't groundbreaking news. Everyone knows that you have to run the ball in order to pass the ball, especially against great defenses in the NFL. And that's part of why I think everyone's so annoyed with the Bengals right now, is we just seem to have no commitment to running the football. And that's exactly where we get to here. The Drake Browning era has begun, and it started off not too bad. The first half was ugly, but we were winning at halftime, and then second half rolled around and it was a whole lot more of the same, and it didn't get much better. Browning made a mistake there at the end, and the Steelers pulled it off. So, Casey, what do you have to say about the Bengals at the current moment?
Ugh. I think there is a misconception on Jake Browning playing well in this game. If you really look at the film, I mean, the 4 sacks are a little misleading. He's holding on to the ball, staring down targets. That's why there was almost 4 interceptions that game. There only ended up being 1. He's not pulling the trigger on guys deep down the field. He even said it himself that he thinks his best attribute is letting loose and throwing the ball deep down the field. He's not even doing that. Um, I just don't have a lot of confidence in Jake Browning getting us over the top. Uh, that part makes me worried. I think the offense makes me very worried for the future. Even like running the ball, it was pretty abysmal. I mean, they were making just mistakes that you make early on this season, and they're still making those same mistakes. Protection wise, not been great. Defensively, there was some lights, some hope. DJ Turner had a good game. Jordan Battle had a good game. Miles Murphy had a good game. I want to see more from that end. And at the end of the day, they only gave up 16 points. So that's all that really truly matters is how many points you give up. And to be honest with you, I do think Joe Burrow plays that game. I think they win that ball game. I think we all believe that. Um, so yeah, I part of me is disappointed. Part of me is just ready to move on to the player evaluation part of this season. So that's where I'm at.
And you hit the nail on the head right there at the end for me. I'm all the way through. I'm going to enjoy watching my guys play the rest of the year. I'm going to like turning the TV on and seeing some of the young guys get some reps. But I think I'm done with the Bengals this season. Not in the sense that I'm going to give up on the squad for the future or anything like that, but this season's over. There's no way we're going to make the playoffs. There's no real reason to try to win a bunch of games here and screw up the draft pick that we could get here. We saw what happened when the Ravens had a down year just a couple years ago. They got Kyle Hamilton, who's now being talked about as an all-pro safety, turning their entire defense around. So this is definitely not ideal. The AFC seems pretty wide open. It would be great to obviously have Joe Burrow, winning a couple of these last two games against AFC North rivals. But if there's a year to be picking in the top 15, this might be the year. I've been doing a little bit of draft class look ahead, and the top of this draft class is very, very good. I see a quick question in the chat. What position do we pick, Jacob? Still very, very early to be looking at where everyone's going to go in the draft. Obviously, some surprises. Some guys could come back to school, but I have my eyes on resetting the T. Higgins contract. This is an amazing wide receiver class. I think if we're picking in the top 10, top 12 picks, a guy like Malik Neighbors, Robe Odunes, Keon Coleman, any of those three guys, no way we get up to a point where we could draft Marvin Harrison Jr., but boy, would that be a dream come true. But I think resetting the wide receiver clock for T. Higgins is probably the route to go if you have a pick that high. If one of the top offensive tackles falls, certainly wouldn't be opposed to that. Maybe replace Jonah if you're not going to re-sign him. But I think picking that high, the Bengals are going to have a chance to reset a contract of a guy that they previously thought they were going to have to re-sign to pretty big money. So that's going to be a pretty solid net positive for this team going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know we'll talk more Bengals here in a minute. So I'm not going to give out my full thoughts on what they should do for the offseason, but I agree with you. I think the draft class is pretty heavy, especially because there's so many quarterbacks that you can consider possibly being in that first round conversation and later on down the draft. There's just a lot of really good talent that pushes down the other talent that the Bengals would be looking at. I saw someone bring up J.C. Latham. That's a guy that I've been looking at. I'm going to start doing my research into the tackles just because I know Jonah probably is either going to leave and go be a left tackle somewhere, or maybe we find some way to tag him again and or T. I don't know. They have a lot of money to spend, so we'll see what that looks like. Got to wait for everyone to get re-signed first before you can start making those calls on which team or which players to go for. But hey, they got 80 plus million to spend, so they got to spend it, and they got to spend it to the cap. And maybe that includes T. Higgins, maybe it doesn't. We'll see when we get there. At this point in time, we got to focus on the player eval. We got to find out what we have. And we'll get into the Bengals here shortly. We're going to start with our first game of the week, the Broncos versus the Texans, which, surprisingly enough, I don't think many people thought this game was going to really be all that big of a deal. They probably overlooked it as one of the two worst teams last year. Right now, we're looking at those two teams being wild card teams. And Bill Billick, Brian Billick, Man, I'm struggling today. Brian Billick, who came on off the bench, pretty much said it the best. These two teams and a couple other teams are now in their own separate division outside of their own called the wild card division. Broncos versus Texans will kind of help figure out which one of these teams is going to be seated where, how they fall in the wild card spot, or if they fall out of it completely. What are your initial thoughts on these two teams, Jacob?
You laid it out there perfectly. This is a game that I never in a million years thought I'd be paying attention to in week 13, but here we are, 8 versus 9 in the AFC, playing for basically to feel really good about yourself going to the playoffs if you win this game. The Broncos, 50% chance to make the playoffs if they win this game, and if they lose, it drops all the way down to 13%. So it doesn't really get much bigger than this for a Broncos organization that probably thought their season was over after allowing 70 points to the Dolphins and getting off to a terrible, terrible slow start. I really love what the Broncos have done, being able to turn this around, and I think that all kind of falls on Russell Wilson's shoulders. Russell Wilson has turned his entire career around this season. He looks like what we saw earlier in his Seattle career, not even those last few years when he was faltering. He looks like a really, really good quarterback, maybe even bordering on that top 10 discussion. He's doing really, really great stuff out there in Denver, and I think it's important to give him credit, but it's also important to think about what possibly went wrong last year. Was it just a complete fluke? Or is Nathaniel Hackett really that bad of a coach? Or maybe Sean Payton's just a wizard, but I think it's important at some point to look back on what went so wrong last year in Denver, because we're seeing right now that this is not a roster to laugh at. It's a pretty special team out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important parts is that Russell's not turning the ball over as much. I think he has a little bit more confidence in himself. He's making the throws. He's doing what he does best, which is run around, get outside the pocket. He's got like 250 yards on the year running, so that's a positive sign. But the other thing too, which I'm going to stick on the running side of this part of this team, Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine make a really great duo. Javonte getting majority of the first and second down carries. Samaje is a great third down back. We know him as Bengals fans. He right now has like 350 yards receiving as a third down back, which is really good. He's got like another 180 yards rushing. Like those two together make a really good combination for whatever they decide to do on third down, which has really helped this team. Right now, they are 12th in the league in rushing. They're really effective right now, and they've only been running it more. When they've been running it more, they have seen a lot of success. That's how they've got this streak kind of going, is the revival of their run game, allowing Russell to get outside the pocket a little bit more and do what he does best. But the other thing that's really helped this Broncos team out considerably is the defense has kind of shown up again. Like for the first couple weeks, we were like, holy crap, this is the worst defense in the league. Now it's like, okay, this is what we thought they were.
This was the whole silver lining for the Broncos last year is, hey, at least we had a defense that was all right. If this offense would score three times a game, if we would get 3 scores a game, we'd win a whole lot of football games. And that wasn't the case at the beginning of this year. And the offense looked a little bit better. So it was really frustrating for Broncos fans everywhere. And yeah, Casey, they're back to what we expected at this point in the year. And since they lost to the Jets, you have it right here. They've only allowed 17 points per game. That's right back in that elite form that they were in last year when they were in nearly every game and the ball just bounced the wrong way and they ended up picking so high in the draft. This defense has been incredible. The secondary with Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons, unbelievable. Both of those guys, one of the best corners, one of the best safeties in the league. Kareem Jackson, he flies around and makes hits. That's the kind of guy everyone's talking about in the chat right here. Just a tone setter, laying the wood. He's been suspended 3 times this year, but when he's on the field, he makes a difference. He knows how to get the ball out. He's a veteran player. They all respect him. You see Justin Simmons, Nick Bonito, a lot of the younger guys on that defense really up in arms about this most recent suspension for Kareem Jackson. I really like this defense. I think they're doing a great job. When a whole lot of things didn't go their way earlier in the season, it would have been super easy for them to just pack it in, call it a year, and move on. But that's not what they did. They buckled down, they looked themselves in the mirror, and they've seemed to have really gotten better.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I know you mentioned Nick Bonito. The combination of Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper, like they're not really missing a beat without Bradley Chubb, like many of us thought they might. They don't have that dominant pass rusher, but the combination of all those guys really has supplemented it. I don't think they're dominant by any stretch of the imagination, but they are above average, and that just does enough to get them over the edge in terms of the pass rush. And I also wanted to shout out McMillan as well. He's one of the best slot corners in the league right now. He really helps make that secondary great. Now the Texans, moving on to the Texans, they just can't seem to catch a break. The injury bug has completely depleted this offensive line. Completely. I was just looking at it earlier, and I could not believe they have like 5 or 6 injured reserve or completely out for the season offensive linemen. Most of their starting offensive linemen are out.
Kenyon Green, their first round pick last year, on IR back in August. Kendrick Green, the guard they signed to replace him, on IR early October. Jarrett Patterson, second round center out of Notre Dame, on IR in November. Then you have Titus Howard going on IR Wednesday. Laramie Tunsil, George Fant questionable for this week. They just can't catch a break. That O-line has been ravaged by injuries this year. They have not been able to walk the same 5 guys out there consistently whatsoever. And it doesn't seem to matter. CJ Stroud keeps him in every game. He's confident in every pocket. He stands there calm and finds the open receiver. And it's fascinating to see, because usually, especially with young quarterbacks, especially with young pocket passing quarterbacks, when you lose a tackle, especially a tackle of the caliber of Titus Howard, you're a frantic mess. You're running out of the pocket right away. You're expecting pressure when there is none. You're seeing ghosts, as Sam Darnold said a couple of years ago. And that just wasn't the case this last weekend against a pretty solid Jaguars pass rush. CJ Stroud looks great. He continues to look great. 26 of 36, 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. We're just right about him every single week, Casey. We give him more and more credit, and he proves us right time and time again.
Right. And I mean, I'm looking at their injury report too right now. Noah Brown's questionable. He's still open, by the way. Dalton Schultz questionable. Larry Tunsil, their other, I think it's left tackle, right? Titus is the right.
Yep.
Larry Tunsil's questionable. Like they are dealing with injuries, and he is still balling out. And I do feel somewhat jealous of that scheme because of how much he's able to just roll out of the pocket and do what he does best. Especially when they're able to run the ball. Here, as of late, they have not been able to against the Jags. But the last couple of weeks, they've been able to be a very balanced team. And when they're balanced, man, they just look unstoppable. All of it has to stem from C.J. Stroud, though. Without C.J., this team is nowhere near the team that it is right now. And it's only going to get better, in my opinion. I think that once they figure out this injury bug issues, I just can't believe it. I mean, they had more than half their team on the injury report when they played the Bengals, and somehow they still managed to beat us. Beat the Bengals, sorry. Shouldn't use us. Unprofessional. Yeah, the Texans, though, offensively, they look really good. Nico Collins, underrated receiver right now in this league. Tank Dell, also really good, very fast. Both those guys, I didn't make much of them at the beginning of the season. I didn't make much of this team really the couple weeks after the Bengals. But when you look at it, they just keep proving themselves. Nico Collins and Tank Dell are a really good duo. Very surprised with that.
Yeah, they've been great so far. 800 yards and 5 touchdowns for Nico Collins, 707 for Tank Dell. Just insane production out of 2 guys that you thought were wide receiver 3s at best coming into the season, and now they seem to form themselves into almost a 1A, 1B duo. It's been fascinating what they've done down there. And Devin Singletary has picked up a whole lot of slack with Dameon Pierce out with an injury. I know a whole lot of us saw him in Cincinnati when he ate the Bengals defense alive, running 30 carries for over 150 yards. But Dameon Pierce back in the lineup this last week. He's going to work up to a higher workload, only 5 carries, but expect him to get back to that lead back role. And this team's much, much scarier when they can run a true thunder and lightning with Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. Casey, you talked about the expectations for the Texans coming into the season, and right after the draft, when they traded their 2024 first-round pick for Will Anderson, a lot of people expected that Texans pick to be in the top 10, maybe even top 5, and that Will Anderson trade was looked at as one of the worst trades in the history of the draft. Well, now the Texans are a borderline playoff team. Will Anderson is top 5 in pass rush win rate. He had 3 sacks 2 weeks ago. He's been everything that he was advertised to be, and the Texans look like geniuses for trading that first-round pick for him.
Yeah, and he's still a rookie, right? Like, that's only going to get better and better throughout the season, right? He's going to eventually find his way, especially, I can't remember the head coach's name right off the top of my... D'Amico Ryans. He's going to figure out and unlock Will Anderson into another level. I can just tell. That pass rush win rate is no joke. It's all about just finishing at this point, and they're going to get there. And you look at the rest of their defensive line, Jonathan Greenyard and Malik Collins, those 2 guys really make this pass rush click, make it tick. Sheldon Rankins also had a great game against the Bengals, but he's been in and out of the lineup as well. But they have a really good pass rush, and it's a little underrated. A lot of their players are underrated for what this roster really, at the beginning of the season, what we thought of this roster. And you have right here, you really like the secondary. I do too. Stingley, since he's returned, 2 interceptions, 4 pass deflections in 5 games. That's really, really good. But it's not just that. I mean, they got Petrie. I really like Petrie. That's a guy I thought the Bengals might look at after the departure of Jesse Bates, but that didn't happen. But he's been
Steven Nelson leads the team in picks. Everyone in the AFC North remembers him from his days in Pittsburgh. He's still doing it at a high level down there in Houston.
Yep. A
lot of people forget that Derek Stingley coming out of LSU, it was a very contentious draft whether to take him or Sauce Gardner as the top corner off the board. We know Sauce has been incredible in New York since he came into the league. Stingley been banged up, been on IR, missed a lot of time. Now he's consistently in the lineup, and he's producing like the top corner everyone expected him to be. It's nice to see, because you worry about those guys that take a year and a half, 2 years off after college, never really get onto the field. But it seems like he's finding it right now, and that's certainly a huge pickup for the Texans defense. We all know how big it is to have a true number 1 corner and just erase the team's top target, and Stingley's working himself up to that point.
Yeah, and there's one player on this team that I didn't have a whole lot of time to go deep and dive into the player itself, how he's been doing this season. But PFF, they do grades and whatnot. I'm subscribed to their platform. And they have one player on their defense, Blake Cashman, a linebacker, who's graded at a 90 in almost everything across the board. I could not believe it. I've never seen something quite like that before. And he's the leading linebacker in total snaps. He's not played every game, but man, he's a real difference maker in that front 7 apparently, and really makes that defense click. So that's
he's
one
the
guy.
Team leader in tackles by nearly 20. He's a name I'm sure no one outside of the Big Ten recognizes. He was a force at Minnesota, but outside of that, certainly haven't heard from him any time in his 4-year NFL career. But yeah, it seems that he has been just unbelievable this year for the Texans. PFF absolutely loves him, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and that also makes sense that Houston is 8th in stopping the run this season, which is my key to the game. I think that when I pull this up, Broncos versus the Texans, Houston is favored by 3.5 points. I really, really like the Texans. I just think that they're going to be the team that shocks everyone. and I think they have a chance to not win the AFC South because I think that's maybe out of reach at this point, but I think they can make a lot of noise in the playoffs. They're young. I like Houston in this game, especially because of that defense being able to stop the run, and that newfound offense for the Broncos really depends on the run game to kind of help support their play action and get Russell Wilson going. So I'm picking Houston minus 3.5. I don't like the hook. I don't like the fact that it's 3.5. I wish it was 2.5, but it is what it is. I'll take Houston.
Texans just 2 games back of the Jags, and they beat them previous to this in the season. So last week's loss means they split the season series. The AFC South definitely still alive. Just a little bit of a long shot for the Texans, but they certainly have to win this weekend. I'm going to take the Texans minus 3.5 as well. I think a close game like that against the Jags, the tide is really turning in Houston. They're building something special down there with a really good culture. I think that continues this weekend. And I'm just not all the way in on the Broncos yet. I'm not sure what else they could show me. They've beaten really good teams the last 5 weeks, and they really haven't faltered at any point. But I still just don't have a whole lot of faith in Russell Wilson, so I'm going to take the Texans.
Yeah, it's a little blind faith. I do know that. I think if you look at the wins, like win for win, well, who Texas has beat, who the Broncos have beat, you probably would pick the Broncos just because they've beat teams like the Chiefs and they beat teams like the Bills. Yeah, it's a little hard to pick and choose which team is more legit than the other. But I'm gonna go with the young talent and the potential that CJ Stroud.
For me, 49ers, Eagles, the top 2 teams in the NFC. I know the Lions are up there too, but I think we all know when it comes to a Super Bowl, the 49ers and the Eagles are the 2 teams in the NFC. Casey, the first thing I notice here is that the Niners are a 3-point favorite against the 10-1 Philadelphia Eagles. Is that a shocker to you at all?
No, no, not one bit. Because, like I said at the beginning of the year, I thought that defensive line when they added, man, I'm drawing a blank, but they added a really good defensive interior guy. I thought that defensive line was stacked. I just couldn't believe it, right? They go out and trade for Chase Young, add more depth to that defensive line. The last 3 weeks, Jacob, they have 15 sacks. 15 in 3 weeks. They played the
That's
Jags.
unbelievable.
They played the Jags. They played the Bucks, and they played the Seattle Seahawks. And out of those teams, those are 2 playoff teams in that mix. I was just shocked, and I'm not shocked that they're 3-point favorites in this game because, like we said all season long, the Eagles, yes, they are the best team. They have the best record, but they continue to be like a step below what they were last season. They were so dominant last season. They were a lot like what the 49ers are right now, just completely dominating teams up front on both sides of the ball. This year, it's not as dominant on both sides, but still pretty darn good. 49ers, though, I mean, when they're all healthy and firing on all cylinders, they're just really good, man. They're just really, really good. So I'm not surprised.
The 49ers have studs across the board. If you go down their lineup and just try to recognize names, I'm not sure there's another lineup better in the league, but we all know that their most pedestrian player might be their quarterback. So it all comes down to how he plays, and this Eagles defense does not make it easy on anybody. I know the Niners O-line is certainly a great one. Trent Williams will erase anybody on that left side, but I expect the Eagles to get a lot of pressure. I think this game's going to be really, really close. I was surprised that the Niners were getting the full 3 points. I was thinking it was going to be 1, maybe 1.5. The Eagles are playing winning football, even though it's not their best. And the Niners are just coming off of a 3-game skid not too long ago. So I was a little bit surprised. I don't know if that tells you where I might be going with my pick here, but the Niners offense seems to have bounced back great after that lull that they had. Brock Purdy was not playing his best football without all of his weapons. And now it seems like he's back and he's playing great. And Debo's back in the mix. Trent Williams makes him much more comfortable in the pocket, and Christian McCaffrey is maybe the best player in the entire NFL.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Williams, when he is in the lineup, they are leagues above 500. I mean, they're I think in terms of the percentage, they're like above 750 when he's in the lineup. When he's out of the lineup, they're like 250. They're not very good without Trent Williams, at least on offense. And I do truly think that he might be the lifeblood of this team on offense because he is the spearhead for the run game. He's protecting your blind side. You always know that you can potentially roll out to that side and you'll be safe as long as Trent Williams is up. But man, CMC makes that job a whole lot easier as well. He's just so dynamic. We talked about him potentially being MVP. I think he's kind of slid off that trajectory. He could get back on track if he had another couple 100-yard games on either side on the receiving and the rushing end of things. But yeah, he's the best running back in the NFL by far. And then Ayuk, man, I said this at the beginning of the season. I thought that he would end up taking the number one role, and he clearly has. He's clearly one of the best receivers in football right now, and good for him. Developed into that role. It used to be Debo, which is very weird to see that the decline of Debo, but even Debo's kind of getting involved again, especially last week. I think he had 7 receptions for 90 something yards. Really good. But the lifeblood of this team is the defense, like I said before. 15 sacks in 3 games. Right now, they're giving up the least amount of points per game, 15.5 per game. And that factors in the 3 weeks that they lost, which they were giving up 24 points per game in that 3 losing streak skid. Before that, any of the games that they won this season, they've only given up a total of 12.25 points per game. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
This unit's just incredible. There's, like we said, there's just dudes everywhere. Nick Bosa, Chase Young, you have Javon Hargrave in the middle, Randy Gregory as a depth piece, Chase Young coming off the bench. They're always fresh and they're always throwing all pro talent at your O line. It's just absolutely incredible. There's nothing like it in the rest of the NFL. And then behind that elite defensive line, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, probably the two best middle linebackers, off-ball linebackers, the best off-ball linebacking duo in the league. Those guys are just incredible. Fred Warner already closing in on 100 tackles, 95 tackles so far this year. He's been just absolutely incredible. And Dre Greenlaw, we know how good he's been. But in the secondary, they lost Talona Hufanga a couple weeks ago to a torn ACL on one of the nastiest juke plays you'll ever see. But I have to wonder how that's going to hurt their defense. They have guys like Charvarius Ward on the outside that we've seen get beat before, and that secondary, I'm worried about it. You know, you have a lot of inexperienced guys, and losing probably the best player outside of the front seven on that defense, I think it might have a ripple effect on the rest of this team's season.
Yeah, that could be something to watch for, especially against the team like the Eagles who have the offensive line that's capable of defending the relentless pass rush that the 49ers roll out there. And they have a receiver duo, I should say, a receiving duo, like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who can really stretch the field. And that might be an area that the Eagles try to target, is that safety position. And we already know Tre'Davious Ward, he got burnt like a crisp bacon strip. Jamar Chase just absolutely burnt him to death. I would expect AJ Brown to maybe do something similar. He's having much better season than Jamar Chase is right now, and he's probably the second best receiver in the NFL right now. I don't know if that's completely accurate though. Just thinking based off his statistics though, he's up there. Yeah, that might be an area that they try to target. But Jalen Hurts, he's been playing a little hurt and he's still pretty effective, but will it continue?
That's the question. And will it continue against an elite defense like you just laid out? Hurts is not healthy, and he's not using his legs as much as he has in the past. But like you said, he's still been effective. They'll continue to get better as he continues to get healthy. You saw it a little bit last week against the Bills. When push came to shove, he certainly was not afraid to tuck it and run and get those tough yards. He did it obviously untouched on that game-winning touchdown. But when they needed a big play, they put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands, and that's exactly what they need to continue to do, because even if he's not lighting the board up statistically like he did last year before he got hurt when he was the shoe-in MVP, he's doing a damn good job, and he's leading the MVP odds, and he has over 3,000 total yards, closing in on 30 touchdowns. He's having a very, very good season. It's just tough when he's being compared to the remarkable year he put on last year. Lane Johnson out against the Bills last week, and that was a huge loss for the Eagles. You saw their O-line get mangled on that left side. He's expected to be back against the 49ers this week. That is a huge addition for this Eagles offensive line. Outside of Trent Williams, he's probably the best left tackle in the entire NFL. And then they have an outside chance of getting another guy back. Dallas Goedert says he's going to try to practice at the back end of this week after a surgery on his leg earlier this year. If they could get both of those guys back for this Niners game, I can't think of a better time to be getting healthier.
Right. It's at a crucial time for the Eagles. They're going to definitely need Lane to be able to be able to protect that the injured Hurts. And we talked about that offensive line and how stout it is. The leader of that offensive line, Jason Kelce, he is definitely the lifeblood of that offensive line. He is not just a leader, but he diagnoses defenses like no other. There was a clip that was circulating around. Him and Hurts were communicating back and forth, and Hurts makes a adjustment that Kelce does not like, and you can see it in his face. He goes like, no, and then he makes a different call and ends up being the right call, which is really funny. But yeah, he is definitely the lifeblood of that offensive line, and he's like very quick. There was a play, I don't think it was against the Bills. It might have been the week prior to that. I don't remember who they played. The Chiefs. Yeah, it was the Chiefs. He pulls and he gets to the safety. He's running, gets to the safety, blows the safety up before the running back could even get through to past the line of scrimmage. I mean, he was just so quick, and for that age and for that man, that was very impressive. Kelce is just a very impressive dude.
Yeah, that's to put it lightly. To be doing that at 36 years old, 300 pounds, that's just incredible, sealing off NFL defensive ends. Jalen Hurts and his 400-pound squat get a lot of credit for the tush push, the unstoppable nature of the tush push. But I know we've talked about it before. I think that all relies on Jason Kelce, and he's what makes that thing go, one of the most unstoppable plays in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, and Swaggy says Kelce will definitely go to media whenever he retires. Yeah, he's also a really great personality. Love their podcast with his brother that they do. Great guy. But one thing that helps having a great offensive line, having that leader in Jason Kelce, Swift. He's been okay. He's had some games. He's had some moments where they're able to run the ball. But as of late, he's been a little ineffective. If they're going to want to continue to be a dominant offense, they really need to get the run game going.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this was always the worry with DeAndre Swift in Detroit, and why you never saw him getting the bulk of the carries, because they thought he would wear down. And late in the year, he wouldn't have the burst and he wouldn't have the effectiveness that he had early in the year. And maybe it's just the wear and tear of the NFL season getting to week 13, and he'll find a second wind here soon. But it seems to be exactly right by the Detroit Lions front office. And DeAndre Swift's tailing off. Week by week, he seems to be getting just a little bit slower, losing a little bit of a burst. You saw last week Kenneth Gainwell working his way back into the mix, getting just 2 carries, but he was in for almost 20% of the snaps. That's way more than any other running back in that backfield was getting with DeAndre Swift in the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on in Philadelphia. But Rashad Penny, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, I'm not really worried about the state of that backfield. If Swift starts to tail off like he has been doing, I expect them to just give the ball to some of their other dynamic playmakers. I still want to see more of Rashad Penny. He did great stuff in Seattle. He was a very, very effective back, led the league in yards per carry 2 years ago. I would love to see him get more touches in this Eagles offense, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that because it seems like they are set on one guy and maybe having a third down back, and that's it. They're not doing a whole lot of rotating at the current moment. And it seems like it's Swift's job to lose at the current moment. Yeah, that's basically all I have for that. The Eagles' defense, very stout. They have two great defensive tackles in the inside. Jalen Carter, one of the main reasons for that. They are second in stopping the rush. It's the other side, stopping the pass. They're 27th in pass defense. Even though they're stacked on the defensive line and they've had some injuries to the secondary, it just seems like that is going to be it's going to be the weakness. That's going to be the thing that ends up hurting them the most, hurting them down the stretch. They just can't really seem to stop the throw. They can't seem to stop the pass at all.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. We've seen a Bills team be virtually underwhelming for the last month or so. Then they go put 34 points and do basically anything they want on the Philadelphia Eagles this last weekend. I'm worried about the back end of this Eagles team. You pointed out their D-line, obviously great. They're getting some pretty solid linebacker play. They worked out Shaquille Leonard today, so maybe an addition to the middle of that defense, which would certainly help. But the secondary not getting better like we expected. They went and traded for Kevin Byard, thought that was going to make a big difference. It hasn't yet. He had an interception in their last primetime game, but other than that, he's allowed 2 touchdowns already, and I think he's probably allowed more than that he hasn't gotten credit for. So I'm definitely worried about this Eagles offense, and as we know, the trade deadline's passed. So the roster that they're with right now is the roster that they're going to try to win a Super Bowl with. Deebo Samuel in the offseason said James Bradberry is trash. Now James Bradberry is going to line up across from him this weekend. I'm excited for this game. I'm really, really worried about this Eagles defense against the Niners offense after the showing they had against the Bills last week.
Right. I am too. And that's why I'm going with the 49ers this week. Like I said, they're one of the most dominant teams in the NFL, especially right now. I have a hard time imagining this game going any other way at the current moment.
I'm going to take the Niners as well. At some point, I'll learn to not pick against the Eagles because they just keep winning, but that point is not going to be today. I'm going to rock with the Niners. I think this defense is going to find a way to stop the run against the Eagles, and I just don't believe in Jalen Hurts, the pocket passer. I don't think he's good enough to get that job done without a consistent run game, and I think the Eagles defense is going to be in trouble against the Niners weapons.
Yeah, I do think they might get exposed a little bit. Just a little bit. We'll see. Depends on how, of course, the X factor on both sides, the quarterback play, how that ends up unfolding. Let's move on to who I thought we were going to next. The Chiefs versus the Packers. Chiefs versus Packers. The Chiefs are one of those teams that also have looked worse than they were last year, but they're still got a really good record. Second in the AFC right now. They're only a half game behind the Ravens. Their offense has really struggled, which is very weird to see when you have one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, Patrick Mahomes. But one of the bright spots, which you have written down here, is Rashee Rice. He's been great over the last couple weeks, and he had 100 yards for the first time last weekend.
It was great. We've been waiting for one of these early round pick Chiefs receivers to break out. Maybe Sky Moore, maybe Rashee Rice. And this last week, it turned out to be Rashee Rice. He finally gets volume. None of these guys have been getting any volume. It's been 2 targets here, 3 targets here, and just throwing the ball around, trying to get someone to get hot. Well, this last week they committed to Rashee Rice. 10 targets. He caught 8 of them. He went over 100 yards for the first time in his career, and only 7 targets to non-Rashee Rice wide receivers. And that's what you do when you have a wide receiver group like the Chiefs right now. You use Travis Kelce, you use your run game, you use Noah Gray, your backup tight end, and you use Rashee Rice. And then maybe you get the ball to everyone else. Kadarius Toney's probably good for a gimmick play or two a game, but I think they've found their guy. And this is what they've been missing. And the offense, we all know, didn't score a touchdown or didn't score a point 3 weeks in a row in the second half. And now this week they turn it on and they pull the game away in the second half against the Raiders. I really like the way this Chiefs team's headed, and with the Bengals out of it, they're going to be fun to watch the rest of the year.
Of course, of course. Yeah, they are. They're going to be very interesting to watch as they learn to develop. Right. I think Rashee Rice is a great target. I wonder if anyone else kind of shows up and kind of. I mean, at this point in the season, it's hard to believe that someone will emerge from that group. But the fact that Rashee Rice has finally started to see more targets, it makes me feel like maybe it's just a matter of time before someone else kind of emerges as well. You can't ever count out the other Kelsey brother, Travis. Whenever Taylor Swift is in town, he's going to ball out. When she's not, he's going to struggle. That's a very funny bit that that is around the NFL this year. And Pacheco, he's electric. He's great. He's exactly what this team needed, especially when you look at how poorly the receivers have done. He's added that dynamic play to where you don't know if they're going to run or pass on third down, and that's exactly what you need in the NFL in order to win ball games. Now, I have written down here that the tackles have really struggled this season. The duo has given up, I think, pretty close to top 5 in pressure together. They, despite giving up a lot of pressures, have not given up a bunch of sacks, which I would usually credit that to Mahomes being able to avoid pressure, being able to move outside the pocket, create plays when things go wrong. I wonder if this will end up catching up to them. I don't know if this is the week that it happens, right? I mean, it's the Packers. We'll talk more about them in a second. But that's something to keep your eye on. Keep your eyes on the tackles. They've really struggled to do much this season. And they're also one of the most penalized duos in the league. So, yeah, it's something to keep your eye on for this Chiefs offense as we continue forward. The Chiefs defense, though, is really what's making this team very, very effective this year. The only reason why they are at where they're at right now. I mean, they're the third best pass defense in the league right now. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, they're getting after the quarterback. Trent McDuffie, he's a top 5 corner in the NFL right now. That group is really, really good right now.
It's been incredible. It's probably a top 5 defense in the league so far this year. You said the 2 guys we all know, George Karlaftis and Chris Jones on the front line, but their linebackers have been one of the most surprising units in the entire NFL this year. Drew Tranquill has been incredible in Kansas City. He was with the Chargers in Los Angeles before this year, and he was back and forth off the practice squad. He finally locked himself down as the starting linebacker last season, but now he's taken the reins of this Chiefs defense with Nick Bolton out, and he's played absolutely incredible, covering nearly the entire field, flying hash to hash. But Nick Bolton's practice window did open today, so maybe he's coming back to bolster this already surprising Chiefs defense. And when they get him back and get back to full strength, this unit might just get even better. And at the level that Trent McDuffie's playing at right now, just completely erasing the other team's best receiver, I'm really worried about this Chiefs defense being a force to be reckoned with, because with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce on the other side of the ball and Andy Reid calling plays, I have all the faith in the world they're going to get that figured out eventually and become a force that we expect offensively. So if the defense can keep this up and maintain, this level of play going into the playoffs when the offense really gets the ball rolling, Chiefs team's going to be really scary and really, really hard to beat.
Now the Chiefs, they play the Packers, and that offense for the Packers really struggled early on in the season, but the last 3 weeks, the Packers offense has really looked good. They've looked like a completely different offense, and a lot of it has to do with Jordan Love. What are your thoughts on Jordan Love, where he stands at right now?
Right now, if I'm the Packers, I'm pretty confident that I have my guy, if I'm being honest. At least for right now, for the time being. I'm not looking at a different quarterback for next year, even the year beyond that. I'm going to pick up his fifth year option. I'm going to rock with Jordan Love. I mean, he's had 289, 322, and 268 the last 3 weeks, all 3 weeks in that 60% range for completion percentage. He's been unbelievable after that midseason stretch where he really dipped and started to struggle after starting the season pretty hot. I like Jordan Love a lot, and they're doing him no favors. No Bakhtiari on the offensive line, the youngest receiving core in the entire league. But hopefully, a little bit of that chemistry is starting to peek through. Christian Watson, 5 receptions for only the second time in his career on Thanksgiving. He looked really good, scored a touchdown, put up a career day production wise when it comes to yards per catch. And then Jaden Reed, their leading receiver, their draft pick out of Michigan State. I don't think anyone would have expected him to carve out such a consistent role in that offense so far. And A.J. Dillon has been pretty productive in Aaron Jones' absence this last week. He had an all right game, but they certainly need Aaron Jones back to get the full dynamic level of that backfield back to let some of this pressure off of Jordan Love, because he's being forced to cook from scratch here, and I don't know how much longer he can do that.
Right. I think this will be a really good test for Jordan Love. I'm not ready to say that I'm in on him just yet. Um, I want to see how he does against the Chiefs defense. If he can manage to stay at a really good level, I'm not expecting the 300-yard day or even a 280-yard day. I'm expecting just enough to stay in the game. I want to see him try to stay in this game and let his defense do some work and not lose the game, right? Part of that is because I think they really need to be healthy in order to even have a chance against this team. But um, the trajectory that he's heading towards, if he keeps balling out like this, I mean, they're going to have another Aaron Rodgers situation on their hands. They're just going to have a guy that completely dominates after struggling early on in their career. And like you said already, I really like Jaden Reed. Christian Watson had a career day. I think that receiving core is going to eventually come into their own. I don't think there's not a standout guy just yet, but they're slowly developing. And Aaron Jones, he really does make a difference on this team when he's in the lineup. I think they are very dynamic, especially on third down. Offensive line still needs work, but Zach Tom, the right tackle, he's looking like a guy. He's looking like a stud. They get Bakhtiari back. Man, they're looking really, really good. Um,
I like a
Pat,
lot of the pieces that this Packers team has, especially offensively. They're young, and that's not helping Jordan Love right now. But if these guys can grow together and mesh together and really find a good chemistry and continue to get better as NFL players together, this team could be really scary. You see a lot of guys when they get drafted and come in with a group of guys and they build it as a unit, that those teams are scary. Those teams with a good strong core are really scary to go up against. So the Packers, if they can keep Jordan Love, Christian Watson, Zach Tom, a couple of those pieces together on the offensive side of the ball and really build around them, they could have a pretty solid core up there in Green Bay.
yeah, and the one thing that is very solid is their defense. The Packers' defense, that defensive line is very underrated right now. You have it written down here. Rashawn Gary with 8.5 sacks this year. He's a stud. It was just a matter of time. Preston Smith, also very good. Um, that defensive front seven is pretty darn good, despite what the numbers suggest. They're 26th in run defense, but I think they make up for that in the pass, where they're eighth in the league. Um, they're really, really good. They have a lot of great players all across their defense. You think of like Jair Alexander, like I said, Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary. Those guys, they're keeping their team in games, right? I think I have what I have written here is that they only really had one bad game against the Lions. Other than that, they've been holding opponents to like 20 points or less. It's really just been about their
And the Lions
offense.
expose
Go ahead. Go
Yeah, and
ahead.
the Lions expose a lot of people defensively. It's not unheard of to have the Lions take your defense and do some impressive things with their offense. But the Packers have been great. I mean, 22, 20, 19, 3 these last couple of weeks. They've been playing some really, really good defense. And Jair Alexander, first limited practice today, coming off of the IR, hopefully soon. He'd be a great boost to their defense to get him back. They're eighth in pass defense right now, and if they can get him back, that number might just go up. So I'm really, really confident in this Packers defense. They resigned Rashawn Gary to that big deal this offseason. It's definitely nice to see him continuing to produce. I think this defense is great. A lot, like I said, with the offense, they have great young pieces. And if they can continue to build around guys like Quay Walker, Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, this team could be a force for years to come. And as the rest of the NFC North starts to falter, maybe the Lions don't know what they're doing long term at quarterback. The Bears obviously have a lot of questions. We've seen the Vikings, both their quarterbacks free agents this year. Maybe long term, this is the Packers division. I like a lot of the groundwork that they've laid in the building of this team.
It's only a matter of time, right? Like I said, it could end up being like another Aaron Rodgers situation, and that's another 20 years of great quarterback play. So we'll wait and see. Um, in terms of who I'm picking for this game, I would love to pick the Packers because I think -6 is a lot against the Chiefs, who don't really score a whole lot of points, play really good defense. But I'm gonna pick the Chiefs anyways because I just can't bet against Mahomes, and I think I'm not ready to say that the stuff that's been going on in Green Bay is working just yet. I want to see them play really well against the Chiefs. Then I'll start saying that they're a pretty decent team.
I agree with your sentiment, but I am going to take the Packers. I think that 6 points is
It's a
just
lot.
too high. We saw
It's a
it from the
lot.
Chiefs last week, playing good in the second half, but that offense has been virtually non-existent in the second half so far this year. And I have faith in Jordan Love going in there and making something happen against this Chiefs defense. I'm going to take the Packers, and I feel pretty good about it. Get 6 full points.
Yeah, I like I said, I knew it was a lot of points. I kind of wanted to pick the Packers, but I'm just not ready to do that yet. I'm not ready to pull the trigger. Um, Maybe after this game, I'll really start giving them some due credit. Moving on to the final game and the last game, which everyone's been waiting for, the Bengals versus the Jags. Jacksonville's favored by 8 points, which just hurts my heart because I feel like the Bengals were favored in this game um, early on in the season. Jacob, we touched on it a little bit. Jake Browning era has started. What are your thoughts on what you saw last week versus the Steelers?
I think the one word would just be frustration. I think we all knew what to expect out of Jake Browning, and that is a backup quarterback. I don't know that anyone thought he was going to go out there and tear it up and light up the field. And how did we reward him? We ran the ball 8 times. So I don't. I mean, I know it's been beat like a dead horse from Cincinnati media about running the football, but I haven't had my chance to stand on my soapbox yet. How do you expect a backup quarterback to get anything done, much less against an elite defense like the Pittsburgh Steelers, when you don't even act like you're going to run the football? It's one thing to not hand it off. It's another thing to not act like you're going to run the football. Jake Browning was standing in the shotgun and pistol almost the entire day, quick slants and throwing the ball to try to create some kind of fake run game in the pass game. And it's just ridiculous. I think at some point we need to realize that the play calling is an issue. And Joe Burrow has masked that for a long time now. These last couple of years, Joe Burrow's masked the problems of this team just by playing lights out football and doing stuff that we've never seen before. Going unbeaten after the bye week and going to an AFC championship game, that's not normal. So I think to have that expectation every single year and slow starts every single year, I think maybe the rest of this season will be a little bit of a glimpse into the behind the scenes of what when Joe Burrow can't cover it up. And maybe we get to ask some tough questions this offseason, and last week might have just been the start.
Yeah, I've already said my piece many, many times across the shows, but you make a really good point about not even attempting to fake like you're gonna run the ball. I mean, we got to do better than that, Zach. We just got to do better than that. Was unacceptable. I would also have to give some grief with the roster construction, because it's very clear to me that Jake Browning was not ready for that game. I don't know if he should be the backup quarterback, to be honest with you. And I know that's a little harsh to say that after one start, but we've seen what it looks like against the Ravens. You got one garbage time touchdown. I mean, they weren't really trying at that point. But other than that, you had like 4 3-and-outs. And then the Steelers this week. I mean, it was ugly. I mean, he was tricked many, many times. It should have been picked off multiple times. He's too hesitant in the pocket. He's not making the right decisions. I don't know. I think there could be a better solution there. I'll give it another week, but it's a week where you're playing the Jags with a really good defense and a pass rusher and Josh Allen that's really good. It's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough for this offense to really get going. I really want to see the young guys get more involved. I want to see Yoshi out there for more than 20 snaps a game. I want to see Charlie Jones out there for more than 20 snaps a game. I want to see Chase Brown. Where's Chase Brown been? He's been hurt, but I mean, we don't know what we have in the young guys. We need to find out what we have so then we can start planning for our future. And 8 carries is just it's not going to get the job done. Steelers.
No, you nailed everything there.
Yeah, and the defense,
it's ridiculous.
The defensively, like I said early on the show, there was some bright spots, but they still allowed 400 yards of. They allowed 400 yards. It's just not good enough. They're not playing good enough, and you got to start to wonder whether or not they are all in. You know, it's just really hard for me to believe, like, you go from last year where they're a top 10 defense, especially in yards allowed, to what they are now. And it's a complete 180. And I don't know. It's tough to be where they're at. It's tough to be where they're at. Simple as that.
Yeah, it's certainly it is, and a lot of people point to that 400 yards allowed to the Steelers as well. We only allowed 16 points. At some point, that doesn't matter. I know the points on the scoreboard are all that matters at the end of the day, and winning and losing is all that matters at the end of the day. Giving up 400 yards to a team, I know they fired their offensive coordinator and made some changes, but giving up 400 yards to a team for the first time in 59 games, that matters. You can't do that. They've played every team in the league, presumably, in that time. 59 games. And they didn't get 400 yards, and they come into Cincinnati and they run all over us and do whatever they want. Najee Harris looks like a first-round pick back to his Rookie of the Year form. I don't know what to expect defensively the rest of the year because Joe Burrow didn't play defense. So I don't know what the excuse is for them. I guess the offense can say that they had a different offense plan for Joe, and they can't call all those plays now, kind of like what we saw happen in New York when Aaron Rodgers went down. But defensively, there's really no excuse. You have your guys. I mean, I know Cam Taylor-Britt was out, but you have, for the most part, your starting lineup out there. You need to play better. It's about pride at this point. You know your offense is not going to be able to light up the scoreboard. Your defense needs to buckle up and hold some teams down. And like I said, 16 points is kind of whatever to me. You allowed over 400 yards, and that's just unacceptable.
Right. It's unacceptable and got to be better. Got to be better. And they're playing. It's going to be hard to play better against the team that they're going to face, who I deemed the mini Bengals. The Jaguars' offense.
Maybe the Bengals are the mini Jags at this point.
Golly, I hope not. Yeah, I mean their offense has got guys all around. They've got a really good run game, which the Bengals have struggled all year long to stop the run. Travis Etienne, one of the best backs in the league right now. The Jaguars have three receivers, if you include the tight end Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk. Those guys, they get you one way or another. One week it'll be Kirk, one week it'll be Ridley. Just a matter of who's gonna dominate that respective matchup. And really, when they are able to protect Lawrence, I mean, it's surgical. It's just absolutely domination from his point of view. And they're just a well-rounded unit. You have it written down right there. They're a well-rounded unit, and they will be able to attack whatever weakness any team throws at them. And that's what's scary.
Yeah, they can do it all. They don't really have big issues. They run the ball effectively. Their offensive line has been great. Their rookie tackle, Anton Harrison, absolutely erased Will Anderson last weekend. He didn't have a single pressure, and he's been great so far this year. So the Jags kind of saw their issues last year. They made it to the playoffs. They had that probable comeback against the Chargers, and I think they sat back. They looked at their roster, and they said, what do we need to fix? And they went out and attacked it, and they seem to have fixed it. They're sitting here at the top of the AFC South playing some really good football, beating some really good teams. I had this game circled for a long time for the Jaguars as their real big first test in this stretch about playing a real playoff team in the AFC after that embarrassing showing against the Chiefs a couple months ago. And obviously we're not going to get that anymore. 8-point favorites, the Jags. I think everyone kind of expects them to run away with this one against Jake Browning and the Bengals. But I don't think that's to take away anything from the Jaguars. I know a lot of us will tune into this game, and I think it's important to watch what the Jaguars do because they're special, and they have some really, really fun players. And I think they're inching closer to that tier of teams that can really win this whole thing because you touched on the studs they have offensively, but Josh Allen has 12 sacks already this year, and he's doing some incredible stuff as an edge rusher off that side. If Trayvon Walker, the guy they took first overall in the draft, can do anything, show any flashes of production on the other edge, that team can be really, really special. Devin Lloyd, a rookie, Aluakon, the leading tackler the last 2 years in the NFL. The defense is special. The offense is young and getting better. I think this Jags team is going to be a force in the AFC for years to come, and I think they might be there this year.
Yeah, I have to agree with the way that they're playing cohesively. That's the word I would say. The team is all well-rounded, offensively and defensively. Now, we would like for them to get another pass rusher, but they get just enough pressure, right? The linebacker duo, it's good, solid. The secondary, good when they're healthy. Tyson Campbell, great corner.
Turnover machines.
Yeah, they're good, right? They're solid. I don't think there's like if you were to point out the stars, like Josh Allen is the star on defense, but there's not really another star necessarily on that defense. You look at the Jags, it's Trevor Lawrence, Etienne, maybe Christian Kirk and Ridley, and then the rest are just good players. Which is why I thought they were the mini Bengals, but it turns out I hate doing this to myself right now, but it turns out that the Bengals had a lot more flaws and holes than we initially believed. That's why I'm very scared about this game. the Jaguars are one of those teams that they haven't really faced yet this year that can do both things very effectively. And we saw what happens when they played the Texans, where they were able to run and throw all over them. It was not pretty, didn't look good. They haven't been able to stop anyone all season long. I hate doing it, but 8 points is so much. But I feel like it's the right thing to do. I feel like the square play is to say that there's a lot of points there. I just don't think the Bengals 200 yards isn't going to get it done. Like that's not going to even get you 3 points against the Jags because they're gonna have to throw because they're gonna have to keep up with the Jags offense. This is just a this is not going to be a pretty game. I don't predict this to be a very pretty game.
It's actually going to be a very pretty game. All black Jags uniforms against all white Bengals uniforms. It's going to be incredibly visually appealing, but I'm going to take the -8 with the Jaguars as well. I think they're just going to steamroll the Bengals. The Pittsburgh Steelers beat us by 6 points last week, and were Deontay Johnson sleepwalking his way through a fumble from them, probably winning by double digits, or at least kicking a field goal, winning by 9 there. So if the Steelers can cover that 8 points in theory, then I'm going to take the Jags to do so as well. This is actually a game my mom and I were planning on going to
Oh, that's right.
before the Joe Burrow injury, but we changed plans. We're gonna do something else, but yeah, this was going to be a great game between two elite young quarterbacks in the AFC. A matchup that we haven't seen yet in the NFL. Two number one overall picks, and it's robbed from us from an injury for Joe Burrow. And it seems like we've said that a lot over the last couple of years. A lot has been robbed from Cincinnati because of Joe Burrow injuries and injuries elsewhere. So hopefully this is the end of it. Hopefully this season, this last 5 weeks is the end of the Joe Burrow injury bug, and the Bengals will get healthy and get back to the top of the AFC next year.
So I know we were going to save this to the end, and we're at the end of our show for the most part. Have you looked at prospects? Have you looked at off season at all? I know a lot of people are wanting off season talk, draft prospects to maybe look at. It's really early for that sort of stuff, but I'm just curious if you have seen anything that you like at where the Bengals are projected to be at.
It's kind of unique. For the last couple of years, we haven't been looking at that elite level of college talent. It's kind of been digging and trying to find, someone in that late 20s, crossing your fingers to pick 32 kind of area. This is totally new for the Joe Burrow era Bengals to be picking this high in the draft. Obviously, Jamar Chase, but that's a little bit different. Like I said earlier, I'm pretty locked in on taking a receiver. I think it's important to reset that T. Higgins contract. And when I say this, I don't mean just let T walk. I think it's crucial to tag and trade him and work something out and get some return for a guy the caliber of T. Higgins. Maybe even pairing him with your first round pick, go up and get a guy, maybe even a Marvin Harrison kind of guy. But I'm pretty focused on getting a wide receiver. The one that sticks out most to me is Keon Coleman. Physically, very, very similar to T. Higgins, 6'4", 230 pounds. He's a physical, big body receiver that'll go up and get the high balls. And then the guys like Malik Neighbors and Romeo Dunes, Washington and LSU, much more similar to Jamar Chase, the quick burst, speedy receivers. But yeah, those are the three guys that I'm looking at right away. If you wanted to focus on the offensive line, the tackle out of Penn State, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not even going to try, but he's the number one offensive tackle on every board you'll find out of Penn State, and he's absolutely unbelievable. He would be a great pick as well. I see a lot of J.C. Latham name being thrown around in the chat. He is a right tackle through and through. He's played right tackle here at Alabama for the last 2 years. You see how well that's working out with the Bears, taking Darnell Wright at 10, a right tackle from Tennessee, and just playing him at right tackle for the Bears instead of trying to flip a left. I think J.C. Latham is a name to look at for sure, but even a guy like him, I think, is a little bit low in the first round for where the Bengals are going to be picking. I think we're looking at the true top tier of talent in this draft class.
You think you're not thinking like top five, are you?
I'm thinking we could be picking top 10 this year. Yes.
See, I'm expecting us to be at that 10 to 12 range. That's where I think the Bengals will end up falling. I think they might get one more win, and that would solidify that take. It's just really hard to tell where the rest of the teams are going to land because the Bears could win another game and be ahead of us and or be, there's so much still left to be played out. 5-12, you're looking at a top 10 pick if they lose out, which would be absolutely miserable. And we've talked about this on the show. I mean, I think Zach would lose the locker room if they lose out. Um, but for me, I've looked at JC Latham just briefly. I think that was the guy I kind of was targeting a little bit. I like the guy from Penn State. I think he's a top 5 pick, though. I'm not sure if he makes it to us at that range. Of course, everyone um, loves the Marvin Harrison. I think he's also another fantastic idea. He's going to be a top 5, maybe even top 3 pick this year. Um, for me,
Jack
though,
Butler throws a name in the chat that we haven't mentioned yet. Brock Bowers at the top of a lot of boards, and I know the
right?
Bengals are tight end needy. I am very, very anti Brock Bowers. I think someone's going to make a big mistake drafting Brock Bowers in the top 5, even top 10, maybe even top 15. I don't think he's anywhere close to the prospect Kyle Pitts was coming out of college at the tight end position, and we've seen how that's worked out in Atlanta. I think positional value is absolutely crucial, especially when you're picking this high and you don't expect to. I don't know when the Bengals will get this high ever again. Hopefully, never. And I think it's crucial to draft someone that's going to contribute at an incredibly meaningful position right away. And I don't think tight end is that.
Yeah, one thing that I've done, I've not just looked at prospects, I've looked at free agency, which is really hard to tell at this point in the year. It's not even really worth mentioning those types of guys, but you're looking at players like Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, some guys that can be another possibly stopgap sort of years because this class is not the greatest in tight ends, unfortunately. I mean, Brock Bowers is one of those top echelon tight ends, but we already know how Bengals value the tight end position. So for me, I'm looking at free agency all the way. I don't think that they're going to really care about the age because they're only going to be here for a year. So I look at some of the top end talent like the Hunter Henrys, Dalton Schultz, just a few that I can think of off the top of my head. The other thing too that we got to consider is, you're potentially losing DJ Reader, you're potentially losing Tyler Boyd. So not only would you be losing T, you'd be losing Tyler Boyd. So that receiver pick is super valuable if you lose both T and Boyd. It might even be worth double dipping at that point to try to get 2 receivers in this draft class to try to help supplement that. Maybe their plan was to hopefully find a guy either in Charlie Jones or Yoshi to kind of help fill that, but we won't know until they play more. So it's really hard to tell what the Bengals should be targeting. But out of all that, I did want to say I really do hope the Bengals target DJ Reader one more time for a small contract, 2 years maybe, and let him play here for another couple years. I would also love for them to maybe go dive deep into the the 3 tech spot, and just pay a guy like Matabike from the Ravens, or there's a couple other guys. I'm drawing a blank on them right now, but there's a lot of great 3 techs right now in free agent class this year. There's some offensive linemen that we might be able to look at for the guard spot if you're wanting to replace Volson. I've seen some stuff that Volson, he's just not great in space. He's great at the other stuff though, so it's really hard to tell where the Bengals will go. We'll cover more of that when we get closer. Obviously, I think lots of people would say receiver, running back is going to be important, backup quarterback, the 3 tech, replacing either DJ Reader, so you're looking at maybe the nose tackle spot. Um, those are the five really big positions. Oh, tight end as well, and right tackle.
One more name I want to throw out there as the DJ Reader replacement, that 3 tech you're talking about. If we're picking there in the late, the 11, 12, 13 range, and the board hasn't fallen quite how we like, Jerzahan Newton, Johnny Newton out of Illinois, number 4, he is an absolute force as an interior D lineman. 7.5 sacks, almost 30 solo tackles as an interior lineman. That's just incredible production in the Big Ten against proven talent on the offensive line. This isn't Pac-12 numbers. This isn't ACC numbers. These are real NFL linemen that he's going up against and making it happen when he's the only guy on an Illinois defense and everyone's keying in on him. So if that board doesn't fall the exact right way to get one of those elite receivers or one of those, Joe Olu, one of those top tackles, I think Jerzahan Newton's a name to keep an eye on as we get closer to draft season. But I know we are still many, many months away, so a lot can change.
Right, right. And you never know. You might get a guy with a really high RAS score that you just fall in love with, and then that writes itself. That concludes our show. I know we didn't do a Thursday night. We didn't do a Thursday night preview, which I think we just kind of overlooked the game. It's a good game, Seattle versus the Cowboys. If I had to pick who was going to win, it's probably going to be the Cowboys. Let's be very honest here. The Seahawks offensive line is one of the worst in all of football. Geno Smith has had a down year, and I think he's going to get eaten up by the Cowboys' pressure. Do we have any props, Jacob? Do you have any props at all to give out for Thursday night? I personally, if I were to pick one, it's going to be something to do with the defense of the Cowboys, probably a sack. Maybe even make it really spicy and say Deron Bland gets another interception because
FanDuel offered that the first time ever a single player pick six was offered on a sports book. 27-1 last weekend, Deron Bland to get a pick six. Obviously it hit. Have to wonder if they'd offer it again, but 27-1, you might just have to take that until he doesn't. So if it's out there, Deron Bland to get a pick six, I'll co-sign that with you, Casey.
Yeah, I would stay if I were to do any other picks though. I would stay clear away from any offensive props from Seattle because I just don't think it's going to work out very well for them against that pressure, against that defensive front. And if I'm going to pick any of the offensive props for the Cowboys, it's probably going to be Tony Pollard, rush yards, something like that.
That's exactly what I was just pulling up to see what that line is. And 70-plus rushing yards for Tony Pollard is plus money, plus 110. That's right when it switches from that negative to that positive, and I'll be all over that. Tony Pollard, 70 yards tomorrow night against a reeling Seahawks defense. We talk about the Cowboys on this show a fair bit because they're a really good team, and the Cowboys dominate bad teams. They just dominate them. That's what they do, and they struggle against good teams. And I'm pretty confident in calling the Seahawks a bad team, so I'm pretty confident and picking the Cowboys tomorrow night. I think the spread is either 8 or 9. As long as it stays below double digits, I'll be pretty confident putting my money on the Cowboys.
I love Swaggy Plague right now. He said Geno Smith is all pro. Casey just doesn't like Geno Smith. That's very funny. Very funny, Plague. That's very funny. Also, just looking at some of the chat. Sean, let me know what the prop is. Let me know what the prop is, and I'll tell you if I like it or not. Bobby Mark, do you think you go O-line if you're sitting around 12 or 13? Just depends, right? I think if you do the mock drafts right now, there's 2 tackles that kind of sit around that spot. J.C. Latham and the kid from Oregon State. Both are relatively the same size. I think they play both at right tackle. I don't know what the difference is between them except Pac-12 and SEC. So you probably go with the SEC, J.C. Latham in that spot. So that's what I would say.
That is a big drop-off from those top 2 tackles to those next 2 tackles. So if you can work your way into an Olu from Penn State or Joe Alt from Notre Dame, that's a true bookend tackle. Yeah. Those next 2, I like J.C. Latham. I like the Oregon State kid. Definitely some physically imposing beings, but those top 2 tackles are in a league of their own. So if you could find a way to get up and get one of them, that would be a franchise changer.
Yeah, Bobby, the question you asked was, would you be targeting O-line in that spot? I guess the answer is probably no. I would probably be looking at whatever the best player available would be at that point because you're probably looking at your third or fourth best tackle at that point. There's not really any guards that are in the top 15 at the current moment from all the stuff that I've seen. So you're not going to probably pick a guard. That's probably not even the Bengals' MO to pick a guard that high. So you're probably looking at the defensive tackle that Jacob mentioned from Illinois. That's probably where you're going with that pick. I'm just looking.
Picking that high is so different than picking in the 20s as well. You don't go in searching for a position. You don't go in looking for a team need. You kind of just let the board fall to you. If we're picking at 11 or 12, I think we just sit there as Bengals fans and cross our fingers that everyone moves up and takes 5 quarterbacks ahead of us, because it's so nice to be picking that high and have your franchise quarterback, because that's what everyone else wants. So in a year with a strong quarterback class and a pretty top heavy draft class in general, I love picking this high this year. I think we're going to get someone really good, but that's absolutely crucial. You cannot fumble this opportunity to get a stud, a plug and play guy on your team, because like I said earlier, hopefully the Bengals never have this opportunity to pick this high again in Joe Burrow's career. So you got to take advantage of it.
Right. And I see that Jack asked if there was any running backs we like in the second or third round. I've not looked that deep into the running back class, especially in the second or third round, but just looking at PFF's big board, I see Blake Corum's right there at 64. I see that Travion Henderson is at 110. Audric Estime right there at 105. I like all three of those guys. I don't know about Jonathan Brooks, the Texas running back. He's a sophomore, so he's going to be younger. That's probably why he's higher up in that.
I'd be shocked if Jonathan Brooks comes out after tearing his ACL.
Oh, I did not know that.
I would
So
assume he
I
would. He tore his ACL a couple weeks ago, so I would assume he would come back to school and try to up his draft stock again.
yeah.
But yeah, this running back class is very good. Braylon Allen, who I don't know what PFF has, I assume he's either number 1 or number 2 of the running backs this year. Over 3,500 career yards at Wisconsin, and he's only 19 years old.
19.
19 years old. It's unbelievable. It doesn't make any sense. He's going to be 20 at the time of the draft, the time of his rookie season kicking off. And that's what we talk about with running backs. You're worried about miles. You're worried about getting old. Drafting a guy that's 19 years old, that'll change everything. So that's someone I have circled. But with an age like that, you might see him creep into the first round.
What in the world? So I'm just looking at his stats. What in the world? He's had 1,200 yards back-to-back seasons. He started in 2021,
He's incredible.
2022, 2020. You're telling me he was 17 years old in 2021 and he played and got 1,200 yards, 6.8 yards a carry.
In the Big
12,
Ten.
12 touchdowns in the Big Ten. What in the world?
Yep. January 20th, 2004. Does that make you feel old?
That makes me feel very... Oh, God. Makes me feel very old. That is nuts. I did not know that. That's why I love going and diving deep in this sort of stuff. That is really interesting. That's really cool. Maybe later on, I know we're kind of stretching late into the show. I don't want to go into the Red Show, which is coming up here in the next couple of minutes. We'll do more stuff like this. But until then, I think we've kind of given our initial thoughts on what the off season should look like. We'll come up with a couple other things to kind of help wrap up the show. And if you have any questions, just message us on DM us on Twitter or whatever, tag us and stuff. See if what our thoughts are. Yeah. But thank you to Swag, to Mark, Lure Up, Big Art, Mark, Jack. I know Elliot was in here earlier. Bobby Mark. Anyone else in the chat? Evan Maurer was in the chat telling me to get my lights fixed. I need to get my lights fixed. I know. It's actually a camera issue because my camera looks great, but the converter here, the capture card, makes everything darker. So I gotta just figure that out. I'll figure that out eventually. I don't know if I said Sean Connor already. Thank you, Sean. You guys are great. We appreciate you coming on every week with us We enjoy the conversation, the chat, and we just appreciate your guys' support.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you guys so much. It was great to be back with you guys. Mac, you've been Mac, and I've been JT.
And this has been the Mac and JT Show. We'll catch you guys next week.